That's awesome. So yeah, so share your screen and introduce us to the world that is Voice Meter Banana.
You
Because
got
remember
it.
when
Here
I
we
looked
go.
at it, I was like, this looks somewhat maybe complicated, but I think it's one of those things probably it's as complicated as you want it to be.
Yes. Okay.
Right. I'm going to lock on you. So there we go.
All right. So I also have Jingle Palette open. So that's there. So
Jingle Palette also free. I remember that.
yes, thank you for the recommendation. So this is it. So I mean, you can see. Okay, I'm talking. You see the levels coming in on what I guess is channel 1. So within that, I have it's got a built-in noise gate. So I have
Nice.
that set on what is level 6 out of I think 10. I can add a little compression. I can, if I monitor myself, let me turn the compression up a little bit. There we go. So my auto should sound a little different.
Yeah, it's what you've done is you've increased not hiss, but like boominess.
Yeah. So I've turned that down. And the other thing, I don't monitor myself because I can hear myself out loud when I talk, and I always know if I see the green line, it's recording. Haven't had a problem. Knock on wood. I have these some basic effects, so I can kind of bring that up there, and I can do this, and I can bring this square around. I can come down.
Oh my
and do,
goodness.
oh, hello.
Yeah.
But
That's
as you've taught, record the most base level audio, and then I do everything else in post production. Then I have the 2 audio cables, cable B, cable A. So if I do bring up Jingle Palette, I have these sounds, separated out. So let's see. So I can tell in Jingle Palette, if I go over to settings in the audio, I can say, where do I want the sound to go? So I'm routing it to this virtual audio cable,
interesting.
which shows up so any program where you can do that. So Skype, even in Google Hangout, I can say, where do I want the audio to go? And that's how I can do a mix minus between 2 different programs. So I could have somebody on a Google Hangout, on Skype, and I could have them talk. Or I've even done it where I brought somebody in on Zencaster just to get them on an audio call and brought them in as a guest with us talking on a Google Hangout.
Interesting. My favorite part of this is the cassette tape.
See now, okay, so when I record, like the actual little, I don't know the parts of the record, but it actually looks like the wheels are spinning on the tape.
Right.
But I can actually use that as a source, so I can actually load up audio through there. So if I was I could bring in an interview, and if I was gonna go live and kind of play back an interview I pre-recorded, I could do it that way. But I would just do that through Jingle Palette.
Right.
So I don't use it for that function. But again, everything that you see here in this, when I hit record, it's doing an 8-channel recording as a wave. And then when I open it up in Audacity, I have all the channels.
And so we have 8 separate wave files.
No, correct? It's one wave file that's multi-channel.
Multi-track. So that's the exact same thing as the mix pre. It's the first time I ran into that, where I was like, wait, how do you unsplit the wave file?
Once I open up the recording?
Yeah.
That's where I'll do the editing. So then when I go to save it from Audacity, I'll save it, as an MP3.
Okay, but you said it was a
it's a multi-track wave. Or maybe I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, with the mix pre, it's weird. I get one file, but when I drag it into like Hindenburg, like this, I'll have one file that's left and right that I think is wave, which is a mix. Then I'll have channel 1, which is me, and channel 3 that is you. So I will drag this one wave file in, and it will give me 4 files. So maybe that's not what this. So they call that multi. Oh, crap, there's a name for it. Multi something wave file. And it's weird because it took me a little bit to get it to open in Audition. I don't think I ever got it to open in Audacity. So that's where I was like, But there's a cool. Go ahead.
I know that it produces a wave file. And when I open that wave file in Audacity, it opens up the 8 channels.
That's cool.
Whether
Awesome.
and whether or not I've recorded anything into a specific channel, it still opens up all 8 if it's a file that got recorded in Voicemeeter. So
Got
the empty channels I delete. So usually it's me, the
it. Right.
guest, and the sound effects. So I usually go from 8 to the 3 that actually have
Stuff on it.
audio.
That's exactly
Yeah.
what I do. Polywave. Thank you, Daniel. I knew there was a fun-filled name for it. So that's very interesting. And it probably isn't. This is, I feel like a person that looks at a mixer for the first time. It's like, oh, there's so many buttons and options. And you're like, yeah, you're only going to use about 4 of these on each channel and forget these and that whole 9 yards. Very
And
interesting.
they do have a basic one. It's just called Voicemeter
Mm-hmm.
that has it's only 2 physical inputs, or it's 1 physical input and then 2 virtual. So again, whereas with this one, I could connect up to 3 USB microphones to my computer. The new one, Potato, I think it's up to 5 physical inputs plus
Potato.
additional virtuals. I don't know where the names come from, but
Potato. Let's call the whole thing off. Exactly.
I mean, there's enough. How do I unshare? Oh, there we go. Okay. There's enough tutorials on YouTube, and they shout them out on their Facebook page as well when a good tutorial is promoted that they're made aware of. So, I mean, if you don't have a mixer but want to be able to do a little bit more with your audio and literally not break the piggy bank, this is certainly a viable tool.
Have you had any stability issues with it?
It's never crashed or like crapped out when I've been recording.
Mm-hmm.
The only issue I've run into is sometimes after about 45 minutes, it will stop recording or say file is too large.
Mm.
So usually I have an eye on that because there's like a little timer on the cassette part. So I'll keep an eye on that if I'm recording a full episode. And I may say, if the person is talking, I'll try and get a clean break in their words and I'll just stop and start the recording again. So then in editing, it's pretty seamless. But that's the only issue that I've seen, is that after about 45 minutes, it might stop recording.
Gets a little, yeah. It's like, hey, I've only got so much memory here, buddy. Give me a break. Liquidy asks in the chat room, what's the next great podcast conference anyone is attending? For me, that's DC Podfest. That people on this side of the pond in October, I'm going to Australia for We Are Podcast, which I was saying the other day. I finally figured out why that name of that podcast makes my brain hurt, is because it's We Are Podcast. And it should either be I Am Podcast or We Are Podcasts. It's like, it's a whole singular. I'm like, why doesn't that sound right? And I'm like, so
Grammar Girl's not going to this?
I guess probably not. She'll have a kid. But after that, in November, you have DC Podfest. And I don't know that anybody, I don't know if there's any kind of conferences going on in December. I would think that would just be a bad idea, because you've got the hustle, the bustle, the decking of the halls. Everything is going on in December.
Did you mention anything in November?
DC Podfest is
also
probably
also in November. I'm hoping to go to on November 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Sound Education. It's going to be up at Harvard, and it's a podcast conference geared towards education podcasting, which certainly fits my niche. but I kind of kicked the door down on that one because I'd heard about it and was like, oh, let me reach out to the person, and I might be on a panel, but I'm hoping to get up there for at least one of the 2 days. It's a Friday, Saturday.
Nice. Yeah, you and why can I not remember the guy from TeacherCast?
Jeff,
yes. So that you guys should be Batman and Robin. That would be right up your thing. I'm seeing a lot more. And Randall Black is another guy that's a teacher.
Randall Black from the Randall Black Show.
Yeah,
fan of my show. I like his podcast. He does some. He's active in the Facebook groups, which kind of inspires me to be more active in the Facebook groups.
Yeah. Do you guys have a? Is there like a educational podcaster kind of Facebook group?
I can do you one better. There's the Education Podcast Network.
Ooh.
Podcast for educators, podcast by educators. For more information, go to edupodcastnetwork.com.
Nice.
That's my baby.
Now, what's the, since you have a network and I'm doing this topic in a couple of weeks, what's your what's the behind the scenes? If somebody comes to you and go, I'm thinking of starting a podcast network, what's your, spew your knowledge of how long have you been doing this network?
Since April 2015.
So what's the first thing they have to figure out?
If you want to start a network,
Yeah.
I would say start with your why. Why do you want to start a network? And for me, it was I was only producing one podcast, but was addicted to podcasting and content creation. And I wanted to connect with other people in education who were doing the same thing. So my network was born out of my desire to connect with other people with the same interest. Not even the technology part, because the network has all sorts of education based podcasts. So I wanted to build community and be able to reach out to other people who might also be a classroom teacher like me, who I could say, hey, how do you do this? Or what are you using? Because we might have similar incomes, and also be a way to connect and, promote each other's podcasts. So that was also a piece of it, as somebody who wanted to produce a well recognized and appreciated podcast, create a way that other people can promote their shows. So part of that requirement is, we have these little bumpers, which I sort of ripped off the idea from Gonna Geek. If you actually go listen, we
Okay.
start off very similar, but that's education: beg, borrow, and steal.
That's it.
So it's that the whole point is to build community. And in terms of like getting on a network like this one, it is at my sole discretion. So I get emails 2-3 times a week, want to be on your network. So I tell them my criteria, and then I'll go and listen, and how I review your podcast. And, right now we have 25 podcasts on this particular network.
Wow. So what's the criteria?
Well, first, if you're brand new and you're telling me I'd like to start a podcast and be on your network,
Yeah.
I say no, because what I do on the back end in terms of how I do the website, and a lot of it's automated and I'm hands off with it. I don't want to go through those steps to add you, and then in 3 episodes you're like, and I don't even hear from you, and now your podcast is dead. If you're on SoundCloud, I try and coach you out of that. So I have a bias towards people who use SoundCloud, and even Anchor a little bit, but it depends on who you are and what your show's about. So I don't know. I'm really kind of weird about it. And I listen to your audio quality. If you sound like you're sitting in your faculty room around a Blue Yeti and like the audio quality is bad, I'm not going to take you. So if you listen to the shows that are on it, they're higher quality, and I'm not even so much concerned with the content, because I'd love to get subject specific podcasts, whether it's history, science.
Right.
I'm looking for good quality sounding audio. So that way there's a certain image I want to have.
So how have you handled it when you've had to say no?
Maybe not the best way. I also ask people questions. Like I'll say, okay, I'll listen to your first and last episode and answer some of these questions. One of which is, how do you grow and learn as a podcaster?
Mhm.
So, and why do you want to join a network? And if their thing is, I want to get my show in front of more people and kind of basically ride your coattails of what you're doing, that's a no for me. If they tell me that, they're doing stuff that, from learning from people like you and other podcasters, that it's like, well, you're doing kind of shady and not the best way of growing as a podcaster,
Right.
you're out, because I don't want to be a part of that or have you sully my waters.
I need a group that we can do promo swaps with, or not promo swaps, but review swaps with.
Yeah, that's definitely out.
Yeah. So you started this to what? Just cross promote? Now, are you doing anything with, because some people might want to start a network to then go after advertisers. Is that something you guys are doing, or is it just mainly cross promotion?
It's a lot of cross promotion, and obviously having the network website as a place where it's another place your podcast will post. Not a player. I use PodTrack to kind of pull in people's shows, so there is a network player on the website so you can listen to the shows. But on the network website, it's really just whatever you put in your show notes that kind of go into your RSS feed. That's what posts. So there's no structure for that. It's whatever you do. My big thing is your podcast stays your podcast. I don't have creative control. I don't own anything. It's your feed. Wherever you do it, it's yours. I'm just kind of going to pull in another place where it'll get promoted. We have a network Twitter account, so it's another way that your stuff gets kind of pushed out to social media, which is big for educators. Twitter's a very powerful tool that we're using.
You said your website is edu. What was it again?
Podcast, edu podcast network.com. It's a Google Blogger blog website that I kind of pimped out with a theme,
Nice.
but it has like our shows, everything posts automatically. I use if this then that to generate the posts based on if there's something new in your RSS feed, make a post. And
Oh,
if
there you
this
go.
then that, I was able to put in the code so like their show artwork shows up every time. So there's a lot of things that I've just kind of automated that make it hands off.
Okay, yeah, it's weird because I know many of these shows. I'm like, okay, cool, because that's the whole thing is like, dude. And now I'm assuming these also have their own website for their own show.
Yeah, they have their own websites. Some of them go to whether it's their Libsyn page or a Spreaker page, or they have their own website that they have. That's like if you go to our shows on that page, it links out to their stuff or wherever they told me. Some of them said link to my iTunes page, link to my website. So I do what they want where they want their link to go.
That's cool. I'm here. Let me because it's pretty cool. It's nice and clean for a blogger site. Here again, you don't have to spend a gazillion. And then you said this is the network player from.
Yeah, that's a player I pulled in from PodTrack.
And then how did you get all 8 million podcasts into one feed?
It's not in one feed. There's I have a publisher account with PodTrack. So
Okay.
it's just me adding other podcasts to my PodTrack account. And then you can do a multi-show player.
I did not know that.
So it's like this feed, it's not a feed that like you can't go to Apple Podcasts or subscribe to all the shows. So there's no feed for that.
Got it. Because I know you can do this kind of player with, you can enter an RSS feed and it will give you a player for a show. I never knew that. I'll have to look into the old I know you can do this with PodTrack. It's funny. I just realized that this is Flash. I'm like, oh, they need to update that. But I never realized I wasn't.
Here, real quick, I'll show you the back end for mine in PodTrack. So when I go into that same area, like so I have all the shows, but then for my account, there's this option for multi-show player. So when I click that, it brings me customize my PodTrack player. I get to that same screen, but now I'm choosing. So I guess there is some sort of RSS or it's the OPML for all the shows on my account.
Right. That's cool.
The only downside with that is when a show, and I've had shows leave the network or shows that have since ended, it's only caused me to have to, I can't delete them. So I always have to email them to say, remove this show. It no longer exists or it's not on my network. So get rid of it. And then it doesn't show up in that network player.
Interesting. Have you ever brought somebody on and then had to remove them because they decided to talk about naughty bits or something that doesn't fit?
Again, when dealing with education podcasts,
right?
A show about being a principal, they're never going to go. I mean, in theory, they could, but they're not going to go off the rails and talk about pornography or anything that's completely inappropriate.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm surprised it's weird. It's a Flash player. That's the only thing that I see that I go, because that's becoming more and more of a pain in the butt. I know I use a website, Pixlr, pixlr.com, and most of the time it works fine, but every now and then it's like, hey, you need to, and you're looking for the little like enable Flash button that somehow has been blocked by a pop-up blocker or something like that. And you're like, wait a minute, I just want to shrink this image for 2 seconds. So, but that's cool. I am, because like I say that and for the record, do I have your permission to just play what we talked about on the School of Podcasting sometime in the future?
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely.
Because I'm interviewing Glenn as well. And I have somebody who's they're doing a true crime podcast. It's really cool. She's actually been on 2020 because the podcast is, this is not the time to draw a blank. Without Warning is the show.
Is this the one that you went to the launch party when you were in?
Yeah. And she's like, I want to start a network. And I'm like, I need to talk to some people to really give Like, this is not something, my network is not a network. My network is a page with links to all my other websites. I call it a network, but it's, I need to do more cross promotion. I have people tell me that all the time. I didn't know what this other show is. You should have told me that. I'm like, oh, okay. But because I know there's a cool plugin called WP-all that if you wanted to, if this was on WordPress, it like you can give it a feed and it will make posts based on the feed. I like the if this then that functionality because it's not a free. It's, in fact, I want to say it was like $70 for the plugin, and that's when I went, all right, I'm not worried about this just yet.
There was one. It died very quickly. It was called Podcast Jockey.
Okay.
It may have even come up here probably over a year ago, where it was one guy from Georgia made this thing where you could kind of curate podcast lists, and he made it where you could curate your favorite podcast that you listen to and submit a feed to Apple Podcasts. But you'd have to do it. It was something that I started. I was like, okay, I think I had less than 20 shows. So I was manually going in every week and using Podcast Jockey, which doesn't exist anymore, to say, all right, pull the new episode of House of Ed Tech, pull the new episode of Podcast PD. So there was a network feed for a little bit, but then that site went away. And then I went into the back end and deleted the podcast. But I would certainly love to have that and be able to say, go over and you could get all of our shows. But I need to be able to do that in a way where, like my network, I'm not hosting anybody else's podcast.
Right. This is all
So
just a place.
it doesn't operate that way. So that's why people can be free to come and go as they please if they don't want to be a part of it anymore. And again, it's all built on community.
Have you, this is one of those things where, have you ever worried about the proverbial, where Google spanks you for having duplicate content? Have you worried about that? I depending on what you read, that it sounds like that's not quite as much of a worry as a lot of people, they're like, oh, you can't have duplicate content. I'm like, I don't think that's quite as, I don't know, maybe not as much as we need to worry about as we do.
It's not something I'm actively worried about because, again, a lot of my podcast marketing, it's when I go and I'm participating in Twitter chats with educators or I'm going to conferences. So I get a lot of either face-to-face time with people who are my audience or target audience, or it's virtual through online conversations. So do I know I have some listeners who have gone to Google and searched education technology podcast? Sure. But it's not really a big deal for me.
Yeah, Daniel says duplicate content by itself is not so much a worry, but there are some things you can do to ensure duplicate content won't hurt stuff. So that's interesting. But very cool stuff, man. That was I knew you had a network. I've never sniffed around it. That was very cool. So I appreciate
and Liquidity had asked that I don't charge anybody to be on it. So it is free. You don't have to pay. And again, you don't give up any of your rights. So for people who want to start a network, that's definitely something to consider. I know that in this chat or other things I've listened to, there could be a fee and maybe it's hosting and, you're getting some stats or things like that. But for me, I know that there are 24 other people I can reach out to. We have a Voxer group that we can all talk to each other. We have an email chain that we kind of work with. And, from time to time, somebody's got a question and they know they have a support system of people who do something the same, if not similar to what they do, and they can count on them.
I would think of nothing else that would be a benefit of like, hey, I need to talk to somebody about this subject. I'm not that, but I bet there's someone in our network that does. And that way you get your answer, but you also then help promote somebody on the network, which is the whole all boats rise kind of situation where if somebody listens to that show now because they were on your show, they're going to hear that promo at the beginning and start driving information back to your site. And from there,
and like you said, I have seen the boats rise because there are podcasts that when they came on, they were smaller. But again, in my sole opinion, I knew that they were in a good niche and the content would be good as they continue to grow. And I've seen, for whatever they're worth, I've seen them climb in the Apple podcast rankings. So if you look at our shows, people who are using desktop iTunes or they're searching, I'm affiliated with a lot of the top education podcasts that are out there. So we're all kind of benefiting from everybody else.
Now, when let's say, Jim's House of School is now part of the network. What do you do? Like when somebody comes on, is there a parade? Is there planes in the sky? Do you do anything special when somebody comes on?
I will typically, on the two shows that I personally host, I will shout them out, play a little clip of their episode. Um, I will also do some marketing from the network Twitter account. And I send an email out to everybody else on the network to say, hey, please welcome so and so. They're now on this email list. Here's a little bit about their show. Here's how you can contact them. And, you know, here's another person that you might want to interview or talk to. So there's been a lot of cross interviews that way where, some of the leadership podcasts we have, they've kind of met each other and collaborated and done some crossover episodes. So it's just me trying to build community. That's the biggest word.
Yeah, that's key at this point. So, man, I just had a question and it came in and went right out of my head. This would be edit point one if it wasn't live. It'll come to me. But interesting. Oh, how do you like you mentioned the Gonna Geek, baby intro, this is Chris from House of Ed Tech, and you're listening to how do you then is that something like a weekly email where you're like, hey, this week we're all gonna use the spot from Ditch That Textbook podcast. Here, everybody play this promo. Is that done all together, or do they just have here's 38 promos, pick the one you want, or do you facilitate some sort of everybody use this promo, let's all laser focus on this show this week?
No laser focus. It's what you said the second way. So we have a shared Google Drive folder. So when new shows come on, they upload the I guess the raw just verbiage of that bumper, and then I pull that down, I add the music, I edit it, and then we have a folder that it's the 25 other bumpers,
Right.
and you're free to pick the ones that you want to use when you want to use them. In the last 6 months, I just made it where the initial requirement was just mention the network at the end of anywhere you want in the show, but at least at the very end. And if you want to shout out a show, but at minimum, just say, this show is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, blah, 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 tagline, mention the website. Then I thought, well, we could probably get more out of this if I move it to the front. So from listening to Better Podcasting, I was like, I like the way they do that. You hear different hosts, you hear the different show names, and I've made that, I've brought that idea over. So we've got these bumpers that just get played at the top of every episode, and there you go.
There you go. Plain and simple. Very cool, my friend. That's I'm still playing with your website. Daniel says, here's the short of it. When there's duplicate content, search engines use their algorithms to decide for you which copy should be considered the authority, but you can use code on the duplicates to indicate what is the source. There you go. When in doubt, ask Daniel J. Lewis, because he'll know. Doggone it.
I've known that for years now.
his middle name is actually Deep in the Weeds. Daniel Deep in the Weeds. I know he says J, but J's just short for Deep in the Weeds. So it's awesome. But well, thank you, kind sir, for warming the chair. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And again, everybody that's listening, check him out over at chrisnessy.com or go check out his network at edupodcastnetwork.com. But enjoy.
If there's a teacher in your life, please share the good word.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, thank you, chat room. And we'll be here next week. Same time, same channel. I am tempted. I might play with BeLive.tv because I couldn't use that before because I was using the Personas and it kept locking me up. So I might play with that. I really like that platform. And I might go play with that a bit. So
awesome. Wherever you are, we will find you.
That's right. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live is where I will be. So one week we'll probably end up on Twitch with me going, I don't know what I'm doing. That'd be great fun. So awesome. All right. Thank you, people. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And again, tomorrow, International Podcasting Day. So go tell somebody about podcasting, doggone it. Thank you.
Take it easy.